What is going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Your guys, Derek and Cody, with you as always. Guys, who are some Indianapolis Colts players who are facing make or break seasons? We're going to break that all down. But before we get into that, just want to say this episode is presented by PrizePicks. Be sure to visit the PrizePicks app today and be sure to use the code BTJ for a $100 deposit match when you sign up. But guys, we have a couple players here that we're talking about today that going into this season, there's a lot riding on it for them, whether it be losing a roster spot, whether it be getting a whole brand new deal done, all of those types of things. We're going to get into that. I will just say right off the very top that Anthony Richardson is not going to be on this list. And I know everyone here knows why. And that's because no matter what happens this year with Anthony Richardson, you're still going to look to see what Anthony Richardson still does the next year. So we're not putting that in here because you all know why. Now, let's go ahead and head to the first name here on our list, Cody. And, it was the first name we thought of. Go ahead, give us the spiel. Who's the first guy on the list?
Yeah, the first guy on the list, a former second-round pick a couple of years ago, Alec Pierce, is here. Now, Derek, this isn't necessarily saying Alec Pierce isn't going to see time. I think quite the contrary. I think Alec Pierce will see a lot of run, and we saw last year how much he, had on the field. He had the most snaps out of any wide receiver on the team last year, over 1,000 snaps. And so it's hard for me to see him just completely be phased out of this team and out of this offense. But, Derek, when you look at Alec Pierce, he's got some competition now. It's not this clear-cut number 2 outside wide receiver role for Alec Pierce. While I still think he has a possibility to play and even maybe start at that number 2 wide receiver position, I do think, Derek, there is going to be some fierce competition. We already know with A.D. Mitchell, what he's able to do. It's like a lot of people, when they kind of compared it, they say, him and Alec Pierce do a lot of things similar, but almost like AD is like an upgraded version of Alec Pierce, where he has more in terms of his skill set than Pierce does. We really know, like, the big knock on Pierce has been just the route running, right? We know what he can do well when it's running down the field and making big plays, but he really leaves a lot to be desired, or at least he has in the first couple years when it comes to the route running. So I definitely think it's a big year for Pierce to prove that he can be a part of this offense because, we've seen some inconsistencies from Alec Pierce. And I know in part we blame the quarterback situation last year, the lack of the vertical threat down the field. But again, Alec Pierce as a whole, as a player, he's got to figure some things out. He's got to grow as a player, and he's got to get better in certain ways, right? And, I think he still will get significant run this year in terms of snaps. But it's not this slam dunk, he's going to get over 1,000 snaps this year, Derek. And so, with Alec Pierce and, trying to figure out, now you're entering year number 3, is he a long-term piece for this Colts offense? I think this year with Anthony Richardson is going to be a big telling point into kind of the future of Alec Pierce with Indy, because if he doesn't, do something and take some sort of noticeable step, I think there's going to be legitimate concerns, and I think rightfully so, about the future of Alec Pierce here with the Indianapolis Colts. Now, I think he has the potential and certainly the talent to do so, but it's going to be a big year for Pierce, no doubt.
Yeah, no doubt about it that this is a year in which a lot of eyes are going to be on Alec Pierce. And, of course, when we saw the draft pick that the Indianapolis Colts were going to be taking Adonai Mitchell in the second round this year, that was a lot of people's immediate response. Like, is this guy going to contend with Alec Pierce for the number 2 outside wide receiver spot going forward for the immediate future, right? So that's the type of situation that Alec Pierce is in right now. Now, no question about it that the Indianapolis Colts staff loves Alec Pierce, and they're going to give him every opportunity to go out there and do some great things. Heck, Cody, as we were recording this, we literally just posted a video of Anthony Richardson throwing a 50, 60-yard bomb to Alec Pierce in a practice right there, right? So, of course, there's going to be no shortage of Alec Pierce down the field highlights from Anthony Richardson this year. I think this is just the this is the year in which Alec Pierce has to show a level of consistency with the numbers that he gets. Now, obviously, the quarterback play is going to have a lot to do with it. When we talk about last year, we mentioned it several times. Alec Pierce had a couple of good games, then some games he was non existent. Now, you and I will both sit here and say that the majority of the time that was because Gardner Minshew flat out half the time just wouldn't throw the football to Alec Pierce because either he couldn't throw it that far or he didn't know he was open when he was open a lot of times down the field. So it really does come down to the scheme, no question about it. But it will be interesting to see what his role is going to be like as the year goes on and how much more developed he is in his game. Is he going to stay that continuous number 2 wide receiver, or is he going to get left in the dust by Adonai Mitchell, who has a better route tree and is able to run a lot more of those underneath routes that the Colts are looking for? And Alec Pierce's role strictly just becomes more of a guy with just the speed and the size to go with him. That'll be an interesting one for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, with Alec Pierce, that's going to be where I'm curious is just the whole idea of, Alec has the thing that he does well, but can he develop as a player? Like, can he get better in some of those areas where, frankly, he's not very good at right now? He hasn't been good at the first couple of years of his career, right? Like, can he do that? Can he take a noticeable step? Because, obviously the quarterback was a factor, but Derek, at the end of the day, like Alec Pierce as a player, he needs to get better. Like, there's no question. So we can blame the quarterback all we want, but Alec Pierce also, in the same vein, like he has to just become more of a well-rounded player. He just has to. And unless he wants to be kind of like, how they do on defense, where they kind of have the guys that they just bring in special packages, like the third down rushers, for example. Like, is he sort of that where he's less of a long-term piece and more of kind of a role situational player, right? And that's kind of where Alec Pierce has to kind of figure it out, because if he can't, he's going to be more of that role situational player. But if he can, he could potentially be a long-term solution and actually get legitimate like playing time and be a legitimate number 2 guy out there. So it's going to be interesting to see for him, but definitely want to see some improvement from Alec Pierce this year. It's a big year for him.
Absolutely. Well, let's go ahead and move to the second player on this list. And this one mainly comes down to a contract dispute here, Cody. That's going to end up being Will Fries. And you and I both have a great feeling of Will Fries. I mean, we have always said that he has played like an average NFL right guard. And I mean, if your worst offensive lineman, and we've always said that, your worst offensive lineman is an average NFL guard, then your offensive line is doing pretty dang well. So Will Fries, though, is going into that last year of his rookie contract. And the pressure is a little bit on Will Fries because, I mean, yeah, if you're going to play at average NFL guard level, then maybe the Indianapolis Colts maybe won't be so quick to try to bring you back. Now, obviously, the Indianapolis Colts love bringing back their own guys, and no doubt that they will certainly try to get a better situation for Will Fries. But remember, you did draft Tanner Bortolini and Matt Gonsalves, who are going to be guys that are going to be competing in those areas, for opening jobs. And if they believe that Matt or Tanner can be somebody that is going to be able to do about the same job as you, then they won't have to worry about paying you that much more money. They'll just go with that guy. What say you about Will Fries and having a make or break season?
Yeah, I mean, no doubt. There's some guys, although albeit they're young, but there are some guys definitely waiting in the wings here. So for a player like Will Fries, if he is wanting that bigger contract or some sort of contract this next year with Indianapolis, I think he needs to take his game to another level, right? Because, I mean, at this point, Derek, I think the Colts are saying, like, average is just not good enough. Like average for a lot of people, that's fine. But I think the Colts want to get that's everybody would, like if you can get a better player in there, absolutely. And Will Fry is not the biggest player in the world. I know he does have, some pretty good athleticism, but again, he was a 7th-round pick, Derek. So really very low amount of resources the Colts committed to him. So if he's a guy that you're like, yeah, we don't really feel comfortable paying him what he wants for the production we got, and we have a few guys waiting in the wings already, I can see that being a very likely scenario. But if Will Fries takes it to another level in 2024 and he goes from an average guard to above average or even Pro Bowl level guard, then that's a different conversation, because that is a completely different type of guy that you're looking at there. Will Fries, every year he's improved, and I know last year was kind of his first full season being the starter, but if he can take another step and, ascend into being, a really, really good guard instead of just a pretty decent guard, I think that's where you start to have the conversations. But if he continues how he did last year, I wouldn't be really upset with Indy just saying, hey, we got some other guys. We'll draft another guard on day 3, and we feel pretty good about our offensive line, right? But if Will Fries proves that he is very indispensable for Indy, I definitely wouldn't be shocked if they did bring him back, because he talked about it. They love their own guys. They love to bring back their own guys, and Will Fries, homegrown guy, and if he, especially if he's a key piece moving forward on that offensive line, he's still very young. Wouldn't be shocked at all.
You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You could turn $10 into $1,000 with NBA, NHL, college basketball, other entries like that today on Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. Prize Picks even offers injury insurance so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. So, for example, for basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game and does not return in the second half of a game, that player projection won't count against you, and the rest of your entry stays alive. As you guys obviously know, NBA playoffs are going on right here, right now. Of course, I'm following the Pacers and the Knicks very, very closely. Be sure to download the app today and use code BTJ for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, download the app today and use code BTJ for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, it's sponsored by Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. All right. Well, let's move on to another player. This time now, from this point forward, we're going strict defense here. And the first defensive player, that's Kwity Paye. Now, obviously, after this year, we know that Kwity Paye is still going to remain with the Indianapolis Colts. So, he obviously is going to have the situation where he gets that 5th-year contract extension because of the first round taken from him in 2021. So, definitely it's going to be an interesting 2 years for Kwity Paye. This would obviously make a little bit more sense next year, but we're in the situation now where the reason why he's even in this spot to begin with is because Latu is here now. And a lot of people are expecting Latu to become the next great edge rusher for the Indianapolis Colts, because Latu is a direct opposite to the kind of player that Kwity Paye was drafted as. Now, I don't know what their overall athletic comps are to one another. They're about the same size. I would say they're about the same athletically. I would say Kwity Paye may be a little bit more athletic than Latu would be. Not entirely sure of that right now, but Latu and Kwity Paye's ways they play the game are very different from one another. So you have a situation right now where Kwity Paye is looking to try to keep his job, because Kwity Paye, while albeit is a great run defender, is not a great edge pass rusher. And that's what you're hoping Latu will become. And then Latu can be more of your every down guy, because even if you lose a slight bit on obvious rundowns, you still can have Latu out there for the majority of your snaps. So, I mean, this is a situation where we're not expecting Kwity Paye to be gone after these next few years. But as far as losing time, Kwity Paye is definitely on the clock with this one. What do you say, Cody?
Yeah, similar to what I talked about with Alec Pierce. If Kwity Paye is just only a run guy, right? Because I mean, we saw the noticeable drop off from even like Samson Ebukam and Kwity Paye. While maybe Paye's slightly a better run defender, like the drop off from the pass rush, it was night and day. I mean, no question. I mean, there's a reason why Kwity Paye was benched in the middle of the season for Tyquan Lewis on pass downs. There's a reason for that, Derek. It's and that's not great. And now you talk about you throw in another guy whose specialty is getting after the quarterback. So yeah, that's kind of the situation where Kwity Paye, I don't see a role for him on third down right now. Maybe he's just more of that first and second down guy, but no doubt he has to figure it out. He's got to figure out how to get after the quarterback, and I'm really hoping that Charlie Partridge can kind of just teach him some things he honestly didn't have in his arsenal. And can maybe get some more out of him. I'm really hoping, because you talk about it, a really, really good run defender. And then that's important to have. But again, if he's not providing quality minutes getting after the quarterback, that's a disappointment. I mean, that is, frankly, for where you drafted him. If the pressure rate's as bad as it was last year, that's just got to get, I mean, it can't get much worse. I mean, it's got to be not just better, but exponentially better at getting after the quarterback. So, I mean, at the worst, he's going to be, a run guy and, come off on third downs. But, I mean, Derek, there might be some times where you're going to need Kwity Paye to figure it out, getting, in terms of the pass rush. So, yeah, he absolutely has to, get better in that department. No question in my mind. Kwity did have, a pretty good, pre-draft process. A pretty athletic guy. So I'm hoping some of that stuff can be tapped into a little bit more. He never was a high volume sack guy at Michigan. So I'm hoping that maybe the Colts and Charlie Partridge, can figure some stuff out with him and can really unlock maybe something that Kwity Paye has never really had in his career. And if they can do that and he can just kind of figure out some other stuff, I think he can become a pretty good player, but the pass rush just has to be like tenfold what it was last year. I mean, maybe even more than that. I mean, that's how bad it was. So, yeah, they got to figure it out. Kwity Paye, certainly, while he's not going anywhere for the next couple of years, I mean, if he wants to be anything more than just a glorified run defender, he's got to figure it out. So we'll see on that. But, yeah, it wasn't great last year.
All right. And then this one is for a tandem of players here, actually. And that involves Nick Cross and Rodney Thomas here in this tandem. Clearly, neither one of these guys are going to be losing a contract right now. But this season, I mean, again, we still, Cody, don't know for a fact whether or not the Indianapolis Colts are going to make moves on any other players in free agency yet. We've still talked about the opportunity for them to take another safety in free agency right now. There has been a couple that the Colts have been linked to. But even if that doesn't happen, you're actually, and you know what? Let's just throw Blackman in there. Might as well, just since it's the entire safety room, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, this is pretty much where we're at right now. Nick Cross and Rodney Thomas, those two guys are competing for whose job is on the line at this point. And then Julian Blackman is sitting over here with whether or not he's going to remain an Indianapolis Colt long term with this contract. Because remember, he got a 1-year contract and it's not much. And it's basically a prove it deal. Julian Blackman, can you stay healthy? Can you stay on the field? And can you continue to do what it is that you're doing while staying on that field the whole time? Can you do that for us? And then we'll talk about paying you. That's what that contract basically insinuates. Cody, what do you think of our 3 highest safeties on the team right now, all facing make or break seasons this year?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of how it is, unfortunately, with this safety room, which is why I'm kind of like, you almost have to sign some sort of veteran at this point. because all of these guys have questions. Every single one have questions of the guys that are going to seriously probably start and compete. And even a guy like Daniel Scott, who I know a lot of people are high on, I mean, he's coming off a major injury. So, like, pretty much this entire safety room, like you said, all have questions, just more for Nick Cross and Rodney Thomas, the consistency. I know Rodney Thomas was virtually unplayable last year. He was pretty awful. But again, he was a 7th-round pick, so like the expectations, aren't as high as a guy like Nick Cross. He was a 3rd-round pick, and a guy the Colts traded up for. He definitely showed a lot more flashes last year, but again, he needs to be more consistent. No doubt about that. And they got to kind of figure that out with Nick Cross. And then you mentioned Julian Blackmon. I mean, just the injury, right? Just the injury and the long-term question marks with Julian Blackmon, because I have no doubt, Derek, if Julian Blackmon stays healthy this year, the Colts will be more than happy to dish out a multi-year deal for him. But that's the biggest question, right? I mean, he had a great year in 2023 with, playing at that strong safety position, transitioning over to that from the free safety position. He had a career year. He led the team with picks. He, was one of the highest leading tacklers on the team, and he was an impact player. He had multiple plays that helped the Indianapolis Colts on the defensive side. And Derek, I mean, you saw the gaping hole that was left when Julian Blackmon went out and missed the final couple games of the season. And you do wonder, Derek, especially in that Houston game, if Julian Blackmon's in there, does that game go differently? It might have, because you had a lot of inexperience back there at safety. And that, I think it also goes back to, like, if that happens again, are the Colts going to just put themselves in another position where they're kind of screwed again? I hope they don't, but we'll see on that. But yeah, like you said, question marks all over the board for this safety room, and the Colts got to figure this out. I mean, honestly, Derek, worst case scenario, obviously, but this is a scenario, Derek, where you could go from you have potentially 2 guys that could be long-term pieces to you have 2 new starting safeties next year. Like, that's how crazy the pendulum could swing when it comes to these safeties, right? Like, if Nick Cross or Rodney Thomas emerges this year, you're fine. You're set at free safety. But if they don't, you still have another problem at free safety. If Julian Blackmon plays healthy, plays, even, the same or even better in 2024 than he did in 2023, yeah, he's a long-term piece. But if he gets injured or he doesn't play to that standard, you're going to be looking for a new strong safety. So it's kind of like a weird situation the Colts find themselves in, where I feel like you have a lot of answers at some long-term pieces for this entire team in a lot of ways. But safety is like the one conundrum, the one you don't really know long-term what's going to happen with this group. So it's quite interesting with that. But I mean, that's why this room is so interesting. And I think that's why we've been kind of pounding the table for a veteran, because you need to know that you can rely on this safety room. And you just can't at this point. I mean, just because of injuries and inconsistencies from certain players. So we'll see on it, Derek.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that's it, guys. Those are some players that we look at and say, these are some guys facing some make or break seasons this year for a bunch of different reasons, as we mentioned earlier. Let us know in the comments, guys. What are you thinking? Did we miss anybody? Is there somebody on this list that you don't think is in this conversation? Well, let us know in the comments. Thank you guys so much for all the support. And as always, guys, go Colts.